Putin's fine. And even if he wasn't, he died for health reasons, one of his replacements would feel the same way. The only way we should expect a political shift is in Russia is if the military defeat is so catastrophic that you get a revolution. That is traditionally how you see political change in the former Soviet world. And we're just not there yet. Yeah,
Disaster.
the people who make decisions based on economic rationale in Russia have already left. There's two weak spots here. The first one is on the input side, specifically raw material. So Russians have one mine that produces 40% of global palladium. There's palladium in every semiconductor. And there is a two-country supply chain system to produce neon, which is used to focus the apertures of the etching lasers. And for that, the first stage is in Russia, and the second stage was in Ukraine in Mariupol, and that's now gone. So that's conservatively half of global neon is gone. So we know we're going to face a semiconductor crunch where we just can't produce the volume we've become used to until we replace those sources from somewhere else. If there was cheap palladium laying around, we would have done that already. And neon, that's a 2 to 3 year period to build out the physical infrastructure to make it happen. The Koreans have started, the Chinese have started, but it's a race against time. So that's problem one. Problem two is that there's not just one kind of semiconductor, so it gets kind of hairy really quickly. But let's start on the high end because that's what everybody is concerned about. There are over 6,000 firms globally that are involved in semiconductor fab facilities for the 10 nanometer and better chips. 5,000 of them are involved with a company called ASML, which is a Dutch firm that does the lithography. Most of those 5,000 firms have no global competition. They're highly specialized. They do one thing for ASML, and most of them only have ASML as a customer. Now, these firms exist in China and Japan and South Korea and Taiwan and the United States and Canada, Mexico, and above all, Germany. See where I'm going here? You miss a few of those pieces, and ASML in its current form cannot function. Now, I am a huge fan of ASML. I think it is the world's best company. Whether it's quality control, managing their supply chain, the technical innovation, the corporate secrecy. Oh my God, they're so good at that. But they are the only company on the planet that makes the lithography machines, which are the most sophisticated machines humans build, for every single one of the fabs that produces the 10 nanometer and better chips. So one piece of that constellation falls out and the whole thing stops. So we don't need a war over Taiwan for this to break down. We need to rebuild the ecosystem in a more sustainable way. And since there are so many pieces to that, this is a multi-year process. So we should count on losing the leading edge chips on a global basis. On the low end, 90 nanometer and worse, the analog chips, the Internet of Things chips, that is 70, 80% within the Chinese system. We should count on losing those too. Now, everything in the middle, the 90 to the 10, like the workhorse chips, most of what we need to do the things that we consider necessary, whether it's aerospace, computers that are not servers, that system is more redundant. That system has more players that have more backup, and there's more competition across the space. I actually think that general area will be fine. But if you want to do Internet of Things, if you want to do electric vehicles, if you want to do automated driving or AI, that we need to write off for a few years. And that is going to be very difficult to build back at scale. Right. But in the worst case scenario, and I don't get to say good news very often, so please take this to heart. Most of the functionality that we have now in our vehicles, in our automation systems, in our aerospace, and our computing, most of that is not as good as the 10 nanometer chips. So some of the newer phones are 10 nanometer or better, but most of them are 10 nanometer or worse. So we might have to take a bit of a breather, but most of what we have now will continue to work. It's just that the pace of improvement is going to slow considerably. It's not just that 90% of the good chips are made in Taiwan. It's that the constellation of forces that allow them to be made in the first place, that is what's in danger. Yes, because it doesn't matter where the break is. ASML is too distributed in the production system, and they have no backups internally, and there is no backup in the market. 10 nanometer chips and better are the ultimate distillation and physical manifestation of a perfect globalized environment that has held
Mm.
for decades, because it has taken decades for each and every one of these companies to get as good as they are at what they do. I don't think the environment that gave us globalization for these last 50 years, 70 years is redoable. We don't have the population structure on a global basis to make it work anyway. Everybody's kind of aged out. And you can't have global trade without global consumption. And now the demographics of Italy and Germany and Russia and China and Korea, they're all terminal. So the basis has never been there. We were always going to get here. We just now have political military issues that are kind of bringing our use by date forward. This was always going to be the decade that this all broke. The Russians and to a lesser degree the Chinese are taking steps to make that happen faster. Well, actually, the United States still has positive population growth, and Mexico has the healthiest demography for its own class, better than India or Brazil. You leave those two aside, there's not a lot left. The birth rate collapse in places like India and Brazil has been catastrophic. And I don't mean to suggest that they're facing a wall this decade or next decade, but the pace of growth is no longer this kind of bottomless supply of people and consumption that we once thought it was. And even if it was, they have not advanced economically to a point where their consumption can replace places like Europe or China. They're in a position where there's no real clear path forward. So I don't want to say one particular path is the one that will or won't work, because none of them really will. The headline in specific, the idea is that China did Belt and Road, and during COVID, they went and told everybody that these were all loans. And everyone's like, no, these were all totally grants. And the only country that tried to pay them back was Sri Lanka, and we know how that went. The Africans literally laughed the Chinese delegations out of the room when the Chinese asked to be paid back. So, that was $1 trillion wasted. The way I would phrase it isn't so much break legs. Like, people are only, if you pay people to be your friends, they're only your friends as long as you pay them. Taking a harsher stance with these countries is just sure to tank relations. I would say that the warrior wolf diplomacy has done a great job of that already. But there's no country or series of countries that the Chinese can threaten to get what they want. There's also no country or series of countries that they can invade and conquer to get them what they need. They need a bottomless supply of foreign technology and a bottomless supply of foreign consumption. And politically, that was always questionable, but now technically it's no longer even possible. The only country that might be able to help them out is the United States, but that means doing everything the United States' way. And I would even argue that with demographic decline around the world, even if China were to roll over and show the United States its belly, I'm not sure the United States any longer has the capacity to provide the scale of assistance that would help a system that has become as stilted and broken as the Chinese system is internally. I mean, this is a country where Enron-style investment has existed over an order of magnitude higher than it did in the United States, where every economic sector is teeter on the brink of financial dissolution by the way we understand financial rules. It's the world's most dependent country in terms of imports and exports. It's completely dependent on energy imports and raw material exports. And at the end of the day, it has to sell to the American consumer. It's like, I'm not sure we could help if we wanted to. So what matters to Beijing, what matters to the CCP&G personally, is power preservation. And economic growth is no longer part of that conversation. It's about the politics. It's about the security lockdown. It's about setting the narrative. And to a degree, does that make China more dangerous? Certainly. But it also means that no matter what they do, China as an internationally diverse, economically wired country is not long for this world. And that means it's all going to be different for everyone in the not too distant future.
Wait.